These are overlooked things that you need to know about if you're thinking about moving to Northport, Florida. The first is that Northport is very rural suburban. You have probably heard us say that on the channel before if you watch this. If you haven't, here's what that means. Rural suburban means it's sort of rural feeling in the fact that there's not a lot of sidewalks, there's not a lot of street lights, and in a lot of pockets of Northport, there's going to be empty, scattered lots, and then maybe there's a home on one, and then there's maybe another couple empty lots, and then there's another home. Also, what rural suburban means is generally you're not going to get sidewalks and street lights in Northport. So that's a big distinction from a lot of Florida, really, for that matter, and the fact that there's no HOAs, which is another thing we'll come to in a second. But if you want a little bit more yard for your money, then Northport's going to be a good option. You're going to get a little bit more space to spread out, generally speaking, through most of Northport, and that lends itself to that rural suburban feel. But on the flip side, and that's going to keep things a little bit quieter for you, and again, have a little bit more nature, have a little bit more of a mix between rural and suburban. It's not completely one, it's not completely the other. Which brings me to the next thing to consider. It is definitely not your typical city. A lot of people call Northport a bedroom community, and what that means is a lot of people live there, but a lot of people don't work there necessarily. And the reason for this is one, that rural suburban feel, but number two, you can get a little bit more house for your money, you can get a little bit more yard and a little bit newer home for your money, but it's not as much of a city. So if you go along Tamiami Trail, pretty much all your basic needs are covered. They got a Walmart, they've got a Walmart neighborhood market, they got Publix, they've got Buffalo Wild Wings and a lot of big chain, Dick's Sporting Goods, like a lot of big chain shops and restaurants and things like that to have all your needs handled. So I'm not saying that they don't have those needs covered on that side of things, but if you want more of a city feel and lots of walkable areas and things like that, you're not going to get that generally in Northport. Now, it seems like, and this is a big thing that goes with it, the area by the town hall there seems like they're kind of developing it to make it semi-downtown-ish, but you're not going to get a quote-unquote dedicated downtown space right in Northport. Now, with that being said, I'm walking through the exception to that, which is Welland Park, which is technically a Northport developed community. So the reason I say technically and put it in quotes and all of that is because Welland Park very much feels like its own thing, and I'm gonna break down why. So your utilities, your infrastructure, the taxes, all that's gonna go to Northport. Your police department, fire department, all that is going to be Northport. Northport built this. But the addresses are Venice, in a lot of the communities anyway. And then the other interesting part about this is where it sits compared to Northport. So sure, if you're in Northport, you could treat Welland Park as your downtown, absolutely. The thing about it is where it sits on the map. So if you go northeast of the Myakka River, that's where most of what people would consider Northport proper is going to be. Southwest of that river is where Welland Park is. So what that means is you're looking at least, I'd say, if you're living across the Myakka River in Northport proper, at least a 10-minute drive, up to maybe a 30, 35-minute drive to get to a walkable downtown. And the reason for that is, number one, if you go to like Northport proper and you gotta go to the edge of where the last chunk of like commercial stuff is on Tamiami Trail, like I mentioned, like that's where all your big box store stuff is going to be. Once you get to kind of the edge of that commercial end of things, that's where also a lot of the housing drops off. So there's not a lot of houses sitting close to the Myakka River, just over the river really close to Welland Park. So if you really want access to Welland Park quickly, you have to live in Welland Park. Meaning if you live in Northport proper, you're not gonna have a really close, quick access downtown area if that's something that's really, really important to you. Which brings me to the next big thing to consider with Northport. And it kind of comes back to that rural suburban thing, but it's sprawl. Northport is one of the largest cities in Florida by landmass, not by population, by landmass. So when you put those two things together, not by population, but by landmass, what that means is the houses are very spread out from one another. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of vacant lots in between the homes. So again, it keeps things quiet, but it also spreads everything out a lot more. So what that means is traffic is generally lighter outside of Tamiami Trail, which is like the main road going through the city. But that also means, yes, quieter traffic, but also it's going to take longer to get places throughout the city or to another city for that matter, unless you happen to sit really close to Tamiami Trail or 75. And even then, since the landmass of Northport is so big, it's still going to add some time on versus if you were sitting in a little more, condensed, dense city with lots of population closer to each other and maybe doesn't spread out as much. So it's something you'll want to consider. Next thing you'll want to consider with Northport, back to that rural suburban thing, but on another tangent, is there's generally not a lot of HOA communities in Northport. And you might say to yourself, hey, no problem, I don't want an HOA. But the question is, are there things that you can only get from an HOA that you'll need to be in an HOA for? And what I'm talking about with that is three things. Number one, a lot of Northport is going to be on well and septic. There's a few pockets. If you're looking to buy or sell a home in the area, get a hold of our team and we can help you navigate that process, because there are a few parts that are not in an HOA that will have city water and sewer. But if you want, city water and sewer, a lot of times you're looking at being on the right end of Northport or being in an HOA in somewhere like Welland Park or some of the few scattered ones in Northport proper. Again, call or text our team at 941-221-1897. We help a lot of people shortcut the process, find the right area for them, avoid some mistakes, and a whole lot more. We would love to help you too and make the process smoother, easier, and more ideal so you can get into the right situation for you. But city water and sewer is one thing to put into consideration when we're talking about not having HOAs. The other, and this is a big one for a lot of people, like for us, we don't live in Northport, we live in Venice, but there are some non-HOA communities in Venice as well. But we wanted sidewalks and streetlights. Those were very big things for us because we just like to take a walk. Just help it feel a little bit safer. You could take your time a little more quiet. You don't have to look out for cars as much. But also, having the streetlights for at night to make it a little more visible if you want to take a walk at night, and just for visibility when driving too, for that matter. So those are really big things for us. But for a lot of Florida, and Northport is no exception to this, you're not going to get those things unless you are in an HOA community. Now, there are some pockets in Florida where you can maybe get those things without being in an HOA. But when we're talking Northport, that's pretty much the rule. There is one section in Northport, kind of an older section closer towards the Myakka, like the west end of Northport, that does have city water and sewer and some sidewalks and street lights without being in an HOA. So that is one thing to consider and maybe put on your radar. But then the homes are going to be a little older there and maybe need a little more work. So some other considerations with well and septic is, number one, being on well and septic, you're not getting a water bill. So that's a nice perk in some ways. But generally, city water and sewer, you're still going to end up having a little bit of minerals in the water, but there's going to be a lot more being on well and septic. So you'll probably want to get a water filtration system or a water softener or both. And that's, again, a thing you'll want to consider with whether it's buying new construction or a resale home. Does it have that already? Is that a cost I'm going to have to put into the home? Or am I willing to just deal with it? Because a lot of that buildup can affect, your piping, some of your appliances and things like that. So those are things you'll want to consider. And then also the upkeep that goes with septic tank. There is cost associated with that. So you're gonna have to decide for yourself what you're okay with, what you do and what you don't want on that side of things. Now, if you do want some of those things, sidewalks, streetlights, city water, sewer, all that, again, there's that area kind of on the west end of Northport that's gonna have some of that. Again, older homes though. But then you also could go the HOA home route. Now, the thing to think about with this is there's different levels of HOAs. Welland Park, where I am, pretty much everything's gonna have an HOA. There's lower cost ones that include less. There's higher cost ones that include more, such as like maybe a dog park, pickleball, tennis courts, basketball courts, resort style pools, fitness centers, golf courses. Like there's all these possibilities, but generally the higher priced HOA is going to get you more, lower price is going to get you less. They're all going to have certain restrictions and things like that as far as the way the homes can look and the yards and things like that, and the kinds of trees sometimes and shrubs maybe even, or the color of mulch. That's getting a little more strict, and not all communities are going to necessarily have all of those restrictions. But those are things that, are going to be like pros and cons and things you're going to have to weigh out and try to find the right area for you, which again, we can help you with shortcutting that process and getting, the right level of HOA if that's something you want. But outside of Welland Park, there are options for HOA communities, and some pretty low cost ones that are also pretty quiet feeling, and they're a little more tucked away throughout Northport. There's not a lot of them, but there are some out there. Again, get a hold of us and we can help you navigate that process and find the right one for you based on the cost you're looking for and the things you're looking to get out of, an HOA. But if you want something lower cost, there's possibilities to just maybe get your sidewalks, streetlights, maybe a community pool, and then city water and sewer. Like those are possibilities. But throughout Northport proper, there are a few options. Welland Park, there's tons of options. Next thing to consider, and this one's really interesting with Northport, is new construction versus resale. Now, obviously with Welland Park, like there's new construction galore. Like anything you buy here is either gonna be new, or even in the older pockets, you're talking maybe 20 years old at the most. But I'd say, just giving a ballpark figure, like 70 to 75% of the stuff in Welland Park, you're talking about like 10 years or less. So you're going to be able to get something pretty new, new-ish, or brand new. Northport proper is no exception to that. I would say there you're looking more at like 30 years or newer. A lot of it though is going to be 20 years or newer, but there's also a lot of new construction homes not in an HOA. So a lot of people think like, oh, all the new construction's happening in HOA communities and that's my only option, and I don't want to do an HOA. You don't have to. You absolutely do not. There's a lot of builders that are building on scattered lots. Again, we can help you with that process to find a builder, or some builders are just building and then selling after it's already been built. So that's an option. But if you want something that's in non-HOA part of Northport, got more of that rural suburban feel, you don't care about sidewalks, streetlights, you know, city water, sewer, there's options out there for you. And you can get that new construction home, or there's a lot of homes out there that are like 5 years old, couple years old, 1 year old, 10 years old. And you could feel like you're in a pretty much brand new home and get a lot of the benefits out of that, you know, new construction peace of mind, or, you know, newest building codes that, you know, bring your insurance costs down and reduce hurricane and flood risk, which that's, again, another whole thing that I won't talk about in this video, but is worth mentioning, you know, understanding flood risks and things like that. Again, you can get a hold of us for that, to help you out with that, to make sure you're in the right area. But generally a newer home is going to bring those issues down considerably because of newer building codes that help mitigate those risks. So with Northport, it's an exciting option to consider those resale homes that aren't really that old, but also getting new construction options is definitely a thing as well. Now, again, on more of the west end of Northport, you're going to encounter some older homes, but the interesting part about those is, so the homes might need a little work, but since they're older homes, a lot of times they're gonna have character and charm that you're just not gonna find from the newer style homes, at least in some people's opinions. Like me, I just love a great old home that's been flipped. I think they look great. But there's things like older windows and things to consider with those. On the flip side though, one other upside to that west end of Northport, like I mentioned before, you get the city water and sewer in a lot of it, a lot of sidewalks and street lights without paying for an HOA. So, you know, like if you're paying taxes, if you're living in a planned community, you're gonna be paying taxes, but then you're also gonna be paying the HOA fee for those things that you could just get on the west end of Northport for just your taxes, which I think that's something to consider. But the other upside of that end of Northport is a lot of the homes have pretty big yards, and it's not that uncommon to see them be fenced in. The homes are also a little less elevated as well. So, you know, there's that give and take and things to consider and all these details. And every home's gonna be different, again, which is why if you're looking to buy or sell a home in that area, get a hold of us so we can help make sure you're looking at all the details you need to know about. Okay, I had to come walk under the Publix overhang in Welland Park here to get some shade a little bit. It's been a long, hot day of doing these videos. But the last thing I think you wanna consider is cost. Now, there's really no downside to this when you're talking about Northport, unless you're talking Welland Park, because the price point goes up pretty considerably in Welland Park. But I'm talking about Northport proper here. And that's where I think the real opportunity lies. In Northport proper, you're going to, generally speaking, get more house for your money, newer house for your money, more house for your money than a lot of Florida. If you want access to lots of things to do in nearby cities, such as, you know, downtown Welland Park, but also downtown Inglewood beaches, and the kind of downtown-ish feeling area by Inglewood Beach, and quick beach access. Venice, you're really close to their historic downtown, all the commercial shopping we've got, I should say, because that's where we live. You're talking about a lot of opportunity really close by, and depending on where you're living, you could maybe get onto 75 really quick and get north or south to Sarasota or Fort Myers for lots more to do, or, you know, more employment opportunities as well. But you can save a lot of money, get some more quiet, get rid of HOA fee costs and things like that, and live a little more, you know, off-grid or just, you know, unbothered in Northport. So cost-wise, on a lot of levels, it's very, very appealing. And that's why a lot of people choose Northport. You can just get a newer home, more home, and for less money. And I don't want to try to date this video too much, but to just give you some ballpark ideas, it's not impossible to get in Northport proper. Again, we're not talking Welland Park here. A home for, I would say, $300,000 and up, maybe even less if it's an older home that needs some work, but I'm talking like a pretty new-ish home, you know, 10, 15 years old. Completely possible. I would say even yeah, 300,000 is doable depending on the size, the finishes, the touches, the updates, all that kind of stuff is possible for something 10 years or newer. And even new construction, like under 400,000 is very doable, which you can't say about a lot of Florida, especially in the Gulf Coast area. In fact, I would say 350,000 is a possibility. Again, this could change by the time the video comes out, and the market's always changing, which is why get a hold of us if you're looking to move to the area, so we can kind of make sure you're in line with what's going on right now and getting a good deal and taking advantage of where the opportunity sits in the market at that time when you're looking to buy or sell. So if you're looking to buy or sell anytime from now within the next 6 months, get a hold of us and we would love to help you out. And if you want to know more about what it's like to live in Northport, check out this video, and Wellman Park, check out this video. Both have very different lifestyles, as you can see, and as I've told you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in one of those videos next. Live breezy.